Hey, is that folk music that you play there? What is that? How do you call that folk music?
I think it was Studs Terkel who asked Big Bill Brunzi, did he consider his blues music to be folk music? And Big Bill says, well, never heard no horse.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't hesitate. It could be your ticket to a new tomorrow.
Birds in the trees, birds in the air, birds in the garden singing everywhere, and all its creatures make a joyful noise. All its creatures make a joyful noise. Dogs on the sofa, dogs in the park, knock on the door, how they love to bark, and all its creatures make a joyful noise. All its creatures make a joyful noise. Whales in the ocean, dolphins in the sea, singing to each other in harmony, and all its creatures make a joyful noise. All its creatures make a joyful noise. Well, I can't make you smile and I can't make you dance, I can't make you sing, but there's a chance. If you look out your window, there's a bird on a branch waiting to sing to you. Kids scream and yell when they play their games. Monkeys in the trees do just the same, and all Earth's creatures make a joyful noise. All its creatures make a joyful noise. Feel the rhythm, clap your hands. You hear the music, now you understand why all its creatures make a joyful noise. All its creatures make a joyful noise. All its creatures make a joyful noise. All its creatures make a joyful noise.
All right. The show is Horses Sing None of It. My name is Ralph Litwin, and our guest today is internationally known singer and storyteller Dan Keding.
Nice to be here, Ralph. Thank you
Nice
so much.
to have you here to entertain us.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, that song was from where?
I wrote that song about 2 months ago. I wanted to have a song because one day one of the kids at a school I was at a couple years ago came up to me and said, you know, music is like noise, but it's there's joy in it. And I thought, God, what a great line. And I kept it for years in my notebook, and then one day, a couple months ago, I thought, you know, joyful noise, what a great idea for a song. So I wrote one.
Great.
So that's it's a good song, I think. You know, we'll see. They take on a life of their own eventually, you know.
So how did you get into storytelling?
I was lucky. My grandmother, who came over from Croatia in 1920, lived with us when I was a boy. And because of that, she brought all these stories that have been in our family for generations and generations.
Wow.
And so she taught them to me. And since I was the oldest of the grandchildren, I was expected to learn them, not just listen to them. It was my job to carry them on. So by the time I was 12, I knew about 35, 45 stories.
Wow.
In Croatian. I translated them later. Go to school and tell my friends, and nobody understood me. But it was always fun to kind of see the quizzical looks in their face. You know, but sooner or later, I put them into English. And when I was a young folk singer back in the 70s, I was in different bands. And then when the last one broke up, the last group I was in broke up, I suddenly realized that I really like talking on stage as much as singing. So I started doing more stories, starting out with the ones that I learned from my grandma.
Could you speak a little Croatian for us, just so we can get the sound of the language?
Dobro dan. That's good day. Kako si? How are you? Dobro, dobro. Kako si ti? I'm good. How are you? So it's a Slavic language. It rolls off the tongue a lot like peanut butter.
Well, what would you like to do for us now?
Well, I'll tell you first a story about storytelling, and then I'll tell you one of the ones Grandma told me.
Great.
The first one is called The King of Ireland's Breakfast. Well, one day the King of Ireland woke. He turned to his wife and said, "Do you know what I want for my breakfast?" And she said, "No, I have no idea." He said, "I want those berries, the ones we had last year in Donegal." She said, "Husband, it would take a fast warrior 3 days to run there and 3 days to run back. Have some oatmeal." But when the King of Ireland got an idea in his head, he could never shake it. So he called for the 3 fastest warriors in all of Ireland come to his quarters. He turned to the first one and said, "Connor, how fast can you run?" Well, Connor stood up, and he was a young warrior filled with exuberance of youth and the arrogance of youth. And he said, "My king, I can run as fast as the hare on the mountain." The King of Ireland shook his head sadly and said, "That's not fast enough." He looked at the next one and said, "Donald, how fast can you run?" And Donald, another young warrior, stood up and said, "My king, I can run as fast as the wind on the moor." The King of Ireland shook his head sadly and said, "That's not fast enough." And he turned to the last warrior, and his name was Fergus. And Fergus was an old warrior. He had been with the king since the beginning. And he was faster yesterday than he is today, and tomorrow he'll be a tad bit slower. And he never left his chair. He just looked at the king, and the king looked at him and said, "Fergus, how fast can you run?" And Fergus smiled and said, "I can run as fast as a storyteller's tongue." The King of Ireland broke into a beautiful smile and said, "You're the man for me, Fergus. Get me those berries." Fergus leaned forward, opened his hand, and there they were. He said, "My king, I've been there, and I'm back." And that's how the King of Ireland had the berries of Donegal for his breakfast. Stories about storytelling are always a lot of fun. Just like songs about being a musician are fun. So it's always a lot of fun to tell a story about storytelling. So, well, Grandma was a great storyteller. She used to creep into my room late at night when I was 5, 6 years old. And she would sit at the edge of my bed, and in this thick accent, well, she would probably speak Croatian most of the time, but even when she spoke English, she had a very thick Eastern European accent. She'd go, "Do you want to hear a ghost story?" And I'd go, "No." You know, I mean, I was already growing up with the garlic by the side of the bed and the rosary hanging off the edge of the bedstead. So, I was already just covered in superstition, so I didn't need any more. And she'd go, "That's too bad, I'm going to tell you one anyway." And she would tell me the most gruesome ghost stories. I mean, I don't tell any of them on stage to this day. And I'd be lying there like this with the covers up to my chin. And then she'd finish and she'd say, "Good night." And she'd leave and turn off the light and close the door. And I'd lie there like this. I mean, I was asleep with my eyes open. And she'd look in on me later on. Years later, I asked her, "Why'd you tell me those horrible stories?" And she said, "Are you afraid of ghosts?" I said, "No. How could anything be worse than those stories?" And she said, "You see, when you become familiar with something, you're not afraid anymore." The old world, you know. But I'll tell you one of the stories she used to tell me. When I was a kid, I learned the stories on one level, like we learn songs on one level, and then you become an adult and everything clicks, and you go, "Oh, that's what it's about." I thought I didn't know it was about that. I thought it was about this. So here's a story she used to tell me when I was a boy. Once there was a man who had the worst luck of anyone in the world. He was a farmer. One year there was a drought, the next year there was a flood. One year, he finally made some money, but the king raised his taxes. The house burned down, the barn burned down. There was a blight on the fruit. The hens stopped laying eggs. The cows stopped giving milk. He could never get ahead. And one day he was walking at the edge of his field. He sat down on a big rock, and he just started to moan. "Why me? Why does everything happen to me?" And just then this creature jumped out from the forest. Tall, with long arms, long fingers. It had stringy black hair with things crawling in and out of it. It had a huge beard with 2 green streaks that corresponded to its nostrils. The earwax was visible. Its breath was horrid, and it was laughing and dancing. And the man said, "Wait a minute! What are you?" And the creature stopped. He bowed and said, "Me? I'm your bad luck. It's because of me that everything horrible happens to you. I just dropped by to make sure you're as miserable as possible." And the farmer completely lost control, jumped up and hit his luck as hard as he could, knocked him out. Took off his belt, tied him up, ran back to the barn, got a shovel, dug a deep, deep pit, threw his luck in the bottom, filled it up with dirt, piled rocks on top, jumping up and down, screaming, and after that he felt really good. We all do. He went back to the house, and he wasn't there for 5 minutes when there was a knock at the door. It was the neighbor down the road. He said, "Oh, this letter came to me. It should have come to you. Sorry." The farmer opened it up, and his great uncle had died and left him a fortune. The next day, he won the lottery. He hadn't even bought a ticket. His luck changed overnight. His hens started giving 2 eggs a day. The cows the sweetest milk. His grain was taller than a 10-foot-high building. Nothing stopped him. He made money hand over fist. His children even got smarter. And everyone felt pretty good for him because he had been down so long. Well, you always do feel good for someone who's been down that long. He went from being the poorest man in the county to being the richest. And the only person who felt bad about this was the man directly across the road because he used to be the richest. So one day he walked over and he said, "My friend, you've turned your farm around. Everything's going well for you. Tell me the secret of your success." The farmer said, "Hard work." No, that couldn't be it. You could work hard on this farm for 100 years and not make it work. Tell me the real secret. Perseverance? Trust me. I won't tell anyone. And finally the farmer broke down. He said, all right, I'll trust you. You see, I found my luck. And his neighbor said, "Your what?" "My luck. It's an actual creature. And I found him, and I buried him. You see that pile of rocks over there by the edge of the woods? He's buried underneath there. And ever since I buried him, everything's gone great for me." And the neighbor said, "Really? How interesting." And so that night, when everyone was asleep, the neighbor walked over with a shovel, moved aside the rocks, dug down till he found the creature, pulled him out, and he said, "Now, my friend, go back to your old master and make his life miserable again." And the creature says, "No, I'm not going to go back to him. He hit me. Look, I got a lump right there. He tied me up. He put me at the bottom of the pit. Do you know how hard it is to hold your breath for 3 weeks? No, I'm not going to go back to him. He's a mean man. But you saved my life. You're my hero. I'm going to stay with you forever." And you know, he did. And that's the story of one man's luck.
Great story.
You can see how Grandma's stories bounce from being good for kids, and then when you get older, being just right for adults. You know, many a time I remember thinking as an adult, "Ooh, I wish I could find my luck." You know, just once I'd bury him in the basement. You know. Living in Chicago, I could put him in a sewer or something. You know, get rid of him, flush him away. But it never happens.
Let's tell folks how they can find out more information about your recordings and your book and your touring schedule.
Great.
They can email you at dantail@earthlink.net, or they can go to dankeding.com, www.dankeding.com. It's Keding.
Thank you.
What else would you like to give us?
Well, I thought I'd sing you another song, and this one is, it has a traditional tune, but the words are a little different. I started out the song for several reasons. One, most places I go to, I haven't heard it here in Delaware yet, so I might be in a really, bizarre part of the country. But most people pronounce where I come from as Illinois. I mean, you can walk across the street into Indiana and someone says, "Oh, you're from Illinois." And I always go, no, I'm from Illinois. Oh, that's right, Illinois. So I wanted to have a song with the word Illinois in it so people would remember how to pronounce it. And then I wanted my wife's name in it, but she goes by her middle name, and not many things that I could use in this song would rhyme with Tandy, so I had to use her first name, which is Ann. And then I wanted a song about the Civil War, about a war and how it shapes people. And this has a ghost that comes back to talk to his wife. So,
So you combined all these
I
things.
combined it all together to come up with this song.
Okay.
Isn't that amazing? You know, you can, I figure, you know, you can't just write a song for one reason. You know? Oh, will you come to Vicksburg, oh my Annie, oh. Oh, will you come to Vicksburg, oh my Annie, oh. See many men a-dying, hear many more a-crying. Oh, will you come to Vicksburg, oh my Annie, oh. And I'll not return to Illinois, oh my Annie, oh. I'll not return to Illinois, oh my Annie, oh. My head at rest beneath the sod, my soul now sleeps with my God. Can't return to Illinois, sweet love Annie, oh. And will you come to Fredericksburg, oh my Annie, oh. Oh, will you come to Fredericksburg, oh my Annie, oh. They marched us off to meet our death, so many men took their last breath. Oh, will you come to Fredericksburg, oh my Annie, oh. And I'll not return to Illinois, oh my Annie. I'll not return to Illinois, oh my Annie, oh. My head at rest beneath the sod, my soul now sleeps with my God. I can't return to Illinois, my sweet love Annie, oh. And will you come to Gettysburg, oh my, oh. Oh, will you come to Gettysburg, oh my Annie, oh. Where brothers slaughtered brother, then we buried one another. Oh, will you come to Gettysburg, oh my, and I'll not return to Illinois, oh my. I'll not return to Illinois, oh my Annie, oh. My head at rest beneath the sod, my soul now sleeps with my God. I can't return to Illinois, sweet love. Oh, do not come to this war, sweet love. Oh, do not come to this war, my sweet love. For if you'd seen the slaughter, you'd have only borne me daughters. Just stay at home in Illinois, my lost love, Annie, oh.
Very nicely done. Very nicely done.
Thank you.
Now you have been writing a regular column in Sing Out magazine for some 20 years.
20 plus years now. The storytelling column. It's great fun.
And it always starts out with a little bit of a story.
That's right. Sometimes it starts with a little bit of story, sometimes it ends with one. Yeah, I always try and put a tiny story in the beginning, because sometimes people forget that stories don't have to be epics. They can just be 1 or 2 minutes. And so I always try and give all the folk singers a chance to become storytellers. You know, give them a story they can remember. Nice short one. That's how I started. You know. You want to hear one?
Sure.
This is one of my favorites. It's a Nasruddin tale. Nasruddin is the wise fool of the Muslim people. And he's like Jack is in Appalachia, you know, to Americans, Jack Tales. Well, one day, Nasruddin's in the coffee house, sipping his coffee and visiting with his friends, when a young man walks up to him and says, "Mullah, I'm getting married tomorrow. Can I have your blessing?" Oh, Nasruddin said, "Of course you can. Marriage is a wonderful thing. I'm so happy for you." The young man looked at him and said, "Well, if marriage is so wonderful, why have you never married?" "Oh, I wanted to," said Nasruddin. "When I was your age, I went looking for the perfect wife. I went to Isfahan. I found a woman of grace, but we didn't have much to talk about. In Cairo, I met a woman we could talk all night, but she had very little grace. And then in Istanbul, I found her, a woman of grace. We could talk about philosophy, literature all night long. She was wonderful." The young man said, "Why didn't you marry her?" "Unfortunately for me," said Nasruddin, "she was looking for the perfect husband." That's a typical Nasruddin story.
I love those stories.
Oh, I love little stories like that, because there's so much wisdom in the wise fool, you know. I have a friend who just did a show, and she did Nasruddin stories and blonde jokes, showing how blondes are the new Nasruddins of the 21st century. I don't think I would have gone that far, but it was an interesting idea. You know, it was an interesting idea. But yeah, the wise fool is found in so many cultures, and it's such a great image. You know, the person stumbling through life, and as they keep stumbling, they keep giving us wisdom. I think it's just a great idea.
What else would you like to do for us?
Well, I'll tell you the story that I wrote to go along with Annio,
Great.
and then maybe we can do a frog story, and have time to do a little frog song, you and I together. How's
Great.
that? Okay. This one's called The Two Warriors. Once a long time ago, there was a war, and two armies came together, and they fought from the time the sun rose until it began to die in the west. And at the end of the battle, there were only two warriors left, two enemies, covered in the blood and gore of battle. They were so tired they could barely lift their swords to strike each other when one man raised his shield and said, "Wait, it'll do us no honor to keep fighting like this. I say, we sleep here on the battlefield, and tomorrow, when the sun is born again in the east, we'll finish this battle, and only one of us will go home." And the other warrior agreed. And they took off their dented helmets, they sheathed their great swords, they unstrapped their shields, and they lay down among their dead comrades. But they were so weary, the weariness that comes with too much killing, that they couldn't sleep. And finally, one man spoke. "Back in my village, I have a son, and he plays with a wooden sword, and when he grows up, he wants to be like me." There was silence for a moment. And then the other man spoke. "Back in my village, I have a daughter, and often when I look in her eyes, I see the youth of my wife." And the two men started to tell stories, one after another. And finally, the sun started to come up. They stood, put on their shields, their helmets, pulled out their great swords, and then they looked each other right in the eye. Without a word, they sheathed their swords, turned their backs to each other, and they both walked home. My grandmother always told me, you can never hate someone once you've heard their story. And that's The Two Warriors. Well, shall we end with a little frog song?
Sure, we have about 3 minutes. We should
Okay.
tell folks again how to find your website, www.dankeding.com. I think they'll maybe flash it on the screen. Maybe.
Well, you know, we can always have the frog do it.
Hello. Gonna do a song about a frog. It's called Froggy When a Courtin'. It's my favorite song. His too. So we're gonna do this together, me and Ralph, and Dan's gonna help.
Okay. Now Froggy went a-courtin' and he did right on. Froggy went a-courtin' and he did right on. Frog went a-courtin' and he did right, and a sword and a pistol by his side on. He placed Miss Mousie on his knee, Placed Miss Mousie on his knee, Placed Miss Mousie on his knee, said, Mousie, won't you marry me, Without my Uncle Rat's consent, Without my Uncle Rat's consent, Without my Uncle Rat's consent, I would not marry the president, Now Racky laughed and shook his sides, Racky laughed and shook his sides, Racky laughed and shook his sides to think his niece might be a bride, Now what will the wedding supper be, What will the wedding supper be, Oh, what will the wedding supper be? A fried mosquito and a roasted flea, Now the first comin' was a big black snake, First comin' was a big black snake, First comin' was a big black snake. He ate up half of the wedding cake, And the next